While we're waiting for those molds to kind of cure, I'm working on the switch for this handle. And I noticed there needs to be an 1/8 inch recession carved out for the guard to actuate in. So I've got it marked out on both sides here where it needs to go. And I'm going to use this guy. I've got a Milwaukee die grinder. I think it was what, 140 bucks? Maybe, no, this is 180 bucks. Anyway, little end mill in there, or burr tool. Kind of hard to focus on it. But I'm just going to use that to carve it out. I love this machine. The only thing I don't like is that little collet in there is so tight that it's almost impossible to get the burr tool out to change it out for a different kind. Because I've got a variety of cutters. This one's for steel. It's a little 1/4 inch guy, nice for doing detail work. Got a few others in here. You know, I've got a round one. Got my old one that's busted. It still works for some things. But then I also have, you know, I've got a larger one here. But I did some aluminum work with it and I got all gummed up. So what I went and did was also purchase the kind for aluminum. So I'm switching these out on a fairly regular basis to do different materials. And for some reason it just doesn't always like to come out real easy. So, oh well. Small price to pay for the speed at which it cuts. Because the die grinder for the air compressor was stalling out and it just wouldn't keep up with what I wanted to do. Of course, my air compressor, 1929 refrigeration unit that leaks more air out the babbitt than it does out the end of the hose practically. So I got the nice gas powered one on the truck, but might as well use this one until it completely quits. So here's what I've done. I've gouged this out so this has a place to travel in on both sides. And a little bit of filing and stuff. There's it in. And it almost falls back out. Of course, all this is going to have to be tensioned with the screws. But there's the basic. I mean, you can pull it out and you can even use the momentum to set the guard out. Yeah. So as long as its tendency is to kind of stay out, I'm okay with it. So now that's about as much as I'm gonna do it. As with playing with it when Scott gets this, playing with it, working the action just for fun, it'll work itself in and establish its own kind of smoothness. The next stage, I believe, I'm to the point where I'm gonna take this from its 36 grit or 24 grit finish here and get it ready for heat treat. Yeah, and then we'll bring it through the grits, then I'll kind of almost hone the edge sharp to where it's almost ready to go, so we don't have too much work to do after it's heat treated, because it's 01, it's going to be relatively hard. Then while I'm drawing the temper in the oven on this, I'll take these pieces, clean up the welds, make them look like the drawings, smooth it all out, and kind of give the side plates a nice finish, get rid of these scuff marks and stuff. And then while that cools down, then I'll give that the final polish to make it all the way it's supposed to be and hit this. Then it's to those molds over there, and we'll have to see. After I get this blade heat treated, I really can't procrastinate anymore about burning the wax out and pouring those, and just kind of do or die time. He wants these by Halloween, so or wants this by Halloween, so I want to get it done for him. So yeah, next step, I'm not going to videotape all of it. You guys have seen me run blades through the grits, you know, across the sander. This project's fairly long enough as far as video goes anyway. So I might do the quench. I think I might show the quench. Of course, I'll update with everything, each step like this. You can tell by the noise, I've got the forge going, it's preheating. I've also got the oven preheating to 475 degrees. Nice and toasty in there. And I've got the blade for the Klingon dagger here, and I've taken and kind of broken all the sharp edges, because with 01 you don't want any cracks. Sharp edges can lead to cracks. do is set my camera up over there on the jack stand. I'll throw this in the fire, and then when it gets to temperature, I'm going to take this wire there and wire through these holes on the back so I can take it and dip it in the oil over there, and then after I do the quench, it goes right into the oven. It's pretty straightforward. So first things first, you take this, which dogs? These dogs. Carefully pick this up, lay it in the forge. Thinking about this, probably want to put the point out there because it's going to take this section longer to heat up than the point. I'll go get the camera ready for when it's time to dunk it. Looked like a successful quench. It was to the right temperature. It didn't stick to a magnet. I've put in the oil. Luckily, no flare up. And a really nice feature was that by the sound of the file, it hardened nicely on the edges. There's the downside of this oven idea, though. There's a reason why I don't do this in the house anymore. And here, I'll just show you. It's smoking pretty good out of that oven. This way I don't have to clean the oil off. We just cook it off. It's gonna stink, so I'm gonna vacate the shop for a few hours. The next, while that, I guess the next step while that blade is doing its thing in the oven is to work on these a little more. And I've done some work to them. I got some porosity there to fix. And I've got, because these are going to be brushed with a brass brush and brassed so they match the handle, I've got to, of course, take care of these gouges. And I've also got to, I want to put a nice polish on this so because the brass will take on whatever finish is on here. And I also want to get rid of these sharp edges so that it's a, you know, it's a nice, well-made looking piece instead of just looking like it's chopped out. So I'm going to try to smooth. These are pretty smooth over the little notches for the things, for the, you know, guards. And that's another thing I got to do. I've got to take these guards and, like I said, true them up so that maybe polish these, you know, polish these welds down. Of course, these ones and then these ones in here as best I can, and make them look like the drawing. Get rid of spatter. And on this guy, I might have to wait to check this with the blade. Kind of want to scoop out the corners so it's a nice place for the thumb to rest. And that'll give you a lower purchase on it when you go to push it, and should make it work a little better. So we'll go out and see if the smoke's cleared. And I'll get going on these two. First of all, smoke-wise, it's not too bad out here. It's all burned off. I want to puke in that oven so bad, but I don't dare. There's no more smoke coming out of it though. I've got probably another hour before I'm going to look in there. Anyway, we got these polished up a little bit better. And it occurred to me, I cannot right at the moment fix the porosity because my stove is plugged into this giant extension cord that goes all the way over here and plugs into my only welderly size receptacle. Yeah, I have 2 welders in here and a plasma cutter in that big oven that plug into that. I need more 50 amp 240 volt receptacles. Just kind of a logistics issue. And I could, well, I'm going to TIG weld it anyway, so I'm going to use my big generator to do that regardless, because I don't have a TIG that plugs into the wall. But it's like 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. I don't want to put my neighbors through that, so that's going to be postponed until later. But while I was standing here thinking, I noticed that I sanded through the weld here, and I need to re-weld this anyway. Not just fix the porosity, but as I'm standing here, it occurred to me that if I weld the other side on, I will have twice the strength. But then that poses a problem. It means that the actuator switch has to be in there. It has to, then it's permanently mounted, because it will not fit through both sides. It locks itself in there. So then what I've got to do is take the appropriate shims that are in there. I think they go this way. Yeah. And line everything up and TIG weld the shim in there, and then the shim will hold this where it's supposed to go so it doesn't rattle. But if I went through all the trouble, it would double the strength of the tang, and then when it came time to assemble the knife, if you ever, need to take the handle off, all I would have to do is slide the handle on and put the bolts in, and then put the guard sides on later. It would essentially reduce it to 4 pieces instead of all the ones you got laying here. This would all be one corporate piece. But cut down on all the goofy parts to assemble. Something to think about while that blade's in there doing its thing. What do you suppose the odds are that I just finished these just in time for the timer to go off for this? So we'll go ahead and check the color, which looks like it's a good dark blue. I can see some of the spots that were somewhat shiny. So we're gonna shut this, turn it off. I'll go unplug it and pretty much let that sit until it cools completely off. Then I'm gonna grab a wire brush and run over that and check for cracks. Maybe even throw it in the vinegar for a day. But here are these. And they're ready to go. I mean, they're finished. So I'm gonna yeah, polish is done on those. So I'm gonna talk to the customer and see if maybe he wants these blued. And if he wants these blued, maybe he wants the blade blued. Can you imagine these with a black finish and the blade with a black finish and polished brass for the guard and handle? I think it'd look cool. But I'm gonna go take a shower and then read my little boy a story, go to bed. Okay, we're out of the oven, and I gave it a quick buff with the wire wheel. There are no cracks, there is no warpage. I bent the tip a little bit when I pulled it out of the fire, so I corrected that now. Real easy. You know, it was just that hot and I drug it. That's what did it when I went to quench it. But to get a nice even finish on this, what I want to do is I'm going to throw this in the vinegar overnight, just like I do the hungamungas. And this mill scale that I created will dissolve. I'll be able to spray it off and take a Scotch-Brite and it'll be nice, fairly bright and shiny. Then I can make sure all my lines are nice and even for the edges and stuff. And get that beautified. And once again, we've got the oven going. This time we're at, oh, my finger's over it. Stupid moment there. This time we're at 350 degrees. And what we're doing now is we're testing some more of those little pucks. And I'm gonna bake them for 3 hours at 350. And then as soon as probably the last 20 minutes of that 3 hours, I'm going to fire up the forge, get it nice and glowing. I'm going to put those in the forge, probably for a good 45 minutes or an hour or so. Maybe I can find something to forge while I'm doing it. But I'm going to shut that off and check them tomorrow and see how well, you know, the crumblies happen. And see, what I'm going to check and see is in here if there's any spalling or exploding. And also in here if they spall after they've been baked at 350. All of this is testing out so I don't wreck those molds it took so long to create. Okay, they've cooled off. This one I put in longer. It was in here a good 30-35 minutes. And I do see some cracks. That's interesting. And some parts of it are crumbly. And of course it does break. The funny thing is, I think it absorbs moisture from the air afterwards. But that's interesting. We have two different colors here. Huh. It apparently turns gray when it's been fired. Interesting. This one here was just in here long enough to turn yellow. Just real quick firing. And it also broke. Yeah, I think there's still moisture in them. So I think I'm gonna burn the wax out at 350 degrees for 3 hours, then jack it up to 550 and hold it there while I melt the brass. Take it out of the oven, set it in a little fire brick thing that I've got preheated, much like that forge. I'll heat it with my big burn weed burner thing. Where'd it go? It's in here somewhere. Anyway, I'll heat it up with a weed burner, set the 500 degree mold in there right before I pour, touch it with the flame just to make sure there's no moisture in it, then take the crucible out and pour it in right away, and I think that'll get me the result I'm after. I think it's really nasty outside. It's a lot of humidity in the air. It's actually sleeting right now, so that might be affecting things. I do have one more puck. I was going to see if I could fire it in the oven and let it cool off overnight just to see what happened if I waited. And yeah, there is no, just firing it to burn the wax out and waiting, it doesn't look like it hurt it a bit. So that's a good sign. I put it back in the oven. So yeah, it's gonna get interesting. I hope I didn't just waste a whole bunch of time and expensive plaster, but it's part of the learning curve when you're learning something a little bit new. Yeah, I don't think I can use sand casting to get the detail I want on that handle though.